The other day I posted online, Anakin Skywalker should have stuck to pod racing. Change my mind. And as I expected, many of you jumped in to disagree with me. Gabriel says, I just can't argue with that. Oh, really? You can't? Khalil says, honestly, won't even try. It's just the truth. Oh. Okay, well, I guess I'm not quite used to this. What were we agreeing about again? Oh yeah, pod racing. For the people who don't know what we're talking about, let's take a moment to review. Anakin Skywalker was a young boy who lived on the desert planet of Tatooine with his mother Shmi. Anakin and Shmi were enslaved by a junk trader known as Watto, and their only hope of freedom is a Jedi named Qui-Gon Jinn. Qui-Gon bets Anakin's freedom on the result of a pod race, a deadly high-speed sport. And Anakin narrowly wins the contest in his homemade pod racer. From there, Qui-Gon brings Anakin to the Jedi Council, who warns Qui-Gon that the child will eventually turn to the dark side. After Qui-Gon gets hole-punched, Anakin's training is taken over by Qui-Gon's apprentice, ObiWan Kenobi.
You will be a Jedi, I promise.
Years later, Anakin and Obi-Wan have become friends, and Anakin has fallen in love with Queen Padme Amidala of Naboo. Forbidden by the Jedi to express his love, Anakin and Padme's romance is kept a secret. From this repression and the tragic fate of Anakin's mother, Anakin's resentment of the Jedi begins to grow. To make matters worse, Anakin is manipulated by the evil Darth Sidious, and after attacking Padme and losing his limbs to a battle with Obi-Wan, Anakin rules by his side as the evil Darth Vader. But what if he stuck to pod racing? Honestly, it's a question that's plagued me. Imagine if Qui-Gon's ship never malfunctioned and he never even met Anakin. For one, a lot of Star Wars characters would still be alive. Emiliano says, I agree. That way he wouldn't have slaughtered all those kids. Now, it's not just the younglings though. In fact, let's take a tally of everybody who would still be living happily if Anakin had continued to speed through the deserts of Tatooine. As mentioned, the younglings, but even before that, an entire village of Tusken Raiders, then Mace Windu, a bunch of separatists, Padme Amidala, the entire planet of Alderaan, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and countless rebel soldiers, like these guys from Rogue One. Now, I think it's safe to say that a lot of these characters would probably be rooting for Anakin to take a couple more laps in his pod racer. RBWeb77 says he would have been better off, probably would have won his and his mother's freedom at some point and lived a quiet life on Tatooine. Yes, this is entirely possible, although I wouldn't put it past Watto to take advantage of Anakin's earnings. He's already a gifted inventor at the age of 9, and I think along with C-3PO and Shmi, they could probably figure out a way to outthink Watto. Then the three of them could live a happy life together, maybe even star in a family sitcom. I think it could be called something like You, Me, and C-3P. You know, something smart and clever like that. Could use some workshopping. Anyway, the life of a pod racer isn't all fun and brilliantly named sitcoms. As some of you pointed out, it has its dangers of its own. Dutch says, tragedy. A young racing celebrity dies young due to a crash. Leaves mothers and droids in mourning and slavery. Dutch, you're a morbid fella, but I think you got a point there. Even just from the race we see, pod races look like they have a pretty high body count. According to Wikipedia, only 6 out of the 18 pod racers even finished the race, and several failed to finish because they exploded. Anakin himself, clearly a gifted pod racer, has several close calls, and in a future race, he might not be so lucky. Even if this would have prevented the galaxy from being run by a brutal dictator, we just can't bring ourselves to wish that fate on this little guy. I mean, look at him, he's just a kid, and he's had a tough life. Now, the only person we would wish that fate on is Sebulba. That guy is the worst. I hate him so much.
Scrawny dough pot, Slimo.
Speaking of Sebulba, I checked out Wikipedia to research other pod racers and happened upon some classic weird Star Wars names. Now, stop me if you've heard these before. Alderbedo, Ben Quadrinos, and Elon Musk? But maybe Anakin possesses a special skill that would allow him to run a safe pod race. MCU fan says he should have done that. By using the Force, he can win every race. Another great point. Anakin may have struggled a little without training, but I can totally see him impulsively using the Force to prevent a crash. In the pod race, we see the engine thingy gets detached from the pod thingy and Anakin starts spinning out of control. An older, more experienced Jedi might have been able to reattach them by using the Force. This looks like a clear-cut case so far. Any arguments for Anakin leaving Tatooine? The real F boot, GD says. I mean, the man doesn't like sand. Let him be him. He obviously prefers lava. Weird, but okay. You know, call me a fool, but I never actually connected that weird sand line to Tatooine until now.
I don't like sand.
Did Anakin say this because he's actually reflecting on his horrible childhood? I guess you probably would hate a planet where you and your mom were kept captive. You probably wouldn't want to stay there even if you were an awesome pod racer. Point taken. Any other reason he should leave the pod race track behind? Tanae says, yeah, but then IG Palpatine and other Sith Lords would have never been discovered. This is where things get complicated. Tanae is right. In Revenge of the Sith, Anakin is the one who reports Darth Sidious to the Jedi Council. And the Jedi Council is shown to be so incompetent in the prequels that I can fully believe that they would never have discovered it on their own. But as we alluded to earlier, Anakin is also the one who disarms Mace Windu and allows Palpatine to escape arrest.
What have I done?
If Palpatine was stopped here, it's possible the Galactic Republic wouldn't have been overthrown. It's possible the Galactic Empire would not have existed at all. Furthermore, Anakin was a particularly brutal general in Palpatine's army. As we mentioned before, he destroyed an entire planet. But even this is not as simple as it first appears. After all, Anakin is the one who ultimately takes down the Emperor, which Luke would not have been able to do on his own. Speaking of Luke, Zach says if Anakin didn't become a Jedi and didn't join Palpatine, him and Dooku would have ruled with no Luke to save everyone. That's right, Zach. Without Anakin, Luke and his sister Leia would not exist. These characters are instrumental to the defeat of the Galactic Empire and key figures in the resistance to the First Order. As we've already mentioned, Palpatine manipulated the Senate by himself and likely didn't need Anakin to take over the galaxy. Even if little orphan Annie stayed on Tatooine, Palpatine could have easily become the Emperor. So we don't want Anakin screwing things up, but we also really want Luke and Leia around to try to fix things. And on top of that, we just like him, okay? Luke and Leia not existing just feels like a net negative for the Star Wars galaxy. Now, on the other hand, no Leia also means no Kylo Ren, which could have some big implications. Anakin sticking to pod racing would not only prevent the existence of one galactic dictator, but might actually stop two. In fact, let's add Kylo's casualties to the list of people who would still be alive if Anakin dedicated himself to becoming a pod racing champ. This nice old man from the start of The Force Awakens. Han Solo, the 5 planets destroyed by the Starkiller base. Luke Skywalker, maybe? Honestly, I'm still not sure exactly how he died. And countless other rebels, including Admiral Akbar. And so the argument for Anakin to remain on the racetrack remains strong. Honestly, the only good reason I saw for Anakin to leave the track were people talking about the iconic lines and moments that wouldn't happen. For example, Kenneth says, but if you kept to pod racing, the fun would never have begun, and ObiWan would have never had the high ground, so...
I have the high ground!
We don't get iconic lines like, I don't like sand, or...
This is where the fun begins.
Now, all good points, though presumably he'd at least be able to say,
Now this is pod racing.
a few more times. Also, some iconic moments would have been even better. Tim says, no, I am your father. That's impossible! My father was Galaxy-class pod racer Anakin Skywalker. So it's starting to seem like maybe it's a fair trade. Finally, there's this argument. Chris says it's bound to become boring, and terrorizing whole galaxies must be much more fun. It would make for a boring movie, which is kinda why a lot of stuff in movies happen. If Anakin would have stayed a pod racer, he might have been happier, but the rest of the Star Wars movies would suck. And that would make me, and probably you if you've watched this far in the video, sad. Alright, that's our episode for this week. Did our reasoning make any sense? Who do you think we should Wonderful Life next? Let us know in the comments below and subscribe to ScreenRant for more Sebulba hatred. That guy's the worst. Alright, see you next time.